What's going on, YouTube? This is Boxingwave. We are back. Hope everyone had a great weekend, man. First off, I want to say thank you to all the supporters of the channel. All you guys that's been leaving comments, been giving me some great comments. I mean, I really appreciate the support. From the breakdown of the Fury Usyk fight to the actual live commentary that I did, which was the longest live commentary I've ever done. It actually ended up being over 8 hours. And also my post-fight recap and the comments that you guys been leaving as well. I really appreciate the support. And hopefully, I can continue to get some of these right. But it hasn't been about getting them right and wrong. Obviously, yes, that's important, but it's more about giving you a great breakdown. Like, listen, if the guy I pick lost, as long as I gave you the keys to where you can see how this fight can go. You know what I mean? And when you do the amount of film study that I did, especially for this fight, the big ones I put more time into them. Same with Crawford and Spence. There are certain fights where I'll put an extra amount of time in because I do want to get it right, but I also want to predict how the fight and the pacing and everything is gonna go. All right, but when it comes to the heavyweight division, you guys can start now. I'm gonna make a post on the YouTube channel and ask you guys, but you guys can start leaving it here in this video. I'm gonna do a video, just a top 10 greatest moments in this generation of heavyweights, like post Klitschko era, which is like, I want to say since the Fury and Klitschko fight. I'm gonna do a top 10 best heavyweight moments. They could be certain rounds, they could be certain knockouts. I think it's because it's not over. Yeah, there's still certain fights that we need to see at the heavyweight division. But you got all of these young guys coming in, and then you have the guys that are younger that's been in the mix, like Daniel Dubois, Jared Anderson. We have those guys, but I think we have some sort of closure when it comes to Fury, Usyk, Joshua Wilder, Dillian White, and so on and so forth. Of course, there's more fights to come, but I want to do a top 10 greatest heavyweight moments of this generation, preferably the last 10 years. So anything from 2014, 2015 up until now, I'm going to do a top 10. All right, but it's going to take me a little time because I want to put everything together. Also, I'm going to do a breakdown of the heavyweight division like I normally do with 154 and other divisions once a big fight happens. But in order to do that, I have to wait a couple weeks. Why? Because we have some huge fights coming up in a couple weeks, and it would help me decide on where everybody should be placed and what fights can we expect in the near future. All right, because a couple weeks, or less than a couple weeks from now, we got Deontay Wilder against Zhilei Zhang, and then we also got Triple D against Hrgovic. All right, so everybody seems to have fought, and I gotta give you an update on how I look at the division, who I expect to fight at this point. I do believe that Usyk has done enough to retire. Obviously, he's going to honor his rematch clause. They already came out and said, like, without even all the paperwork, we're going to honor the rematch clause if Tyson Fury wants to fight again. But I don't personally think there's anything left for Usyk. I think he has done everything he needed to do, and I think he can retire now. I think at this point, any other fight that happens is just a fun fight. Whether he fights Parker or Anthony Joshua for a third time, or Deontay Wilder or Zhilei Zhang or Hrgovic, it's just, they're good fights, but there's nothing that I feel like I need. I think Usyk has proven to be the top dog of this time. You know, just my opinion. Of course, you got Crawford, then you got Nue as well. So they're right there, the three of them, and Canelo as well. But I think I've seen enough, and I think Usyk for me, it's completed, it's done. You know, it's nowhere else to really go from here, but just to give us some good fights. All right, his legacy is cemented, and I can't say that about anybody else. There's still work to be done for every other fighter, in my opinion. Whereas Usyk, it's nothing else to do. All right. So this video is going to be the wave report number 36. I haven't done the wave report in a while, but I just want to recap the fights this weekend, and I'm going to start out with the Navarette Baranchyk card. All right, now I didn't watch the entire card because obviously I was live, and I've only had time to go back and watch the two main fights. So we're going to start out with Giovanni Santillon against Brian Norman Jr., which was for a WBO interim title. This is a welterweight fight. And I didn't do a breakdown and do any film study of these guys. I'm basing it solely off Santillon coming off of his biggest win against Alexis Rocha, and Brian Norman Jr.'s, you know, performances recently that weren't too great, you know. And someone asked me, and I did do a quick prediction run through right before, you know, the Fury Usyk match, and I've been following Brian Norman Jr. You know, I've been watching his fights because I heard of the rumors of him, you know, hurting Crawford in sparring or knocking him out in sparring and stuff. So once that happened, I started to really pay attention to this guy, and I started going back and digging and finding out whatever I can find out on this kid, because I wanted to see if he's going to be the next guy up. You know, and I watched his fight. I watched the Campos fight. You know, I watched at least his last 4 or 5 fights. And the Quentin Randall fight, which was 2 fights ago, which was a real test for both. All right. I knew Quentin Randall was going to be the better boxer to me going into that fight. And I knew Brian Norman Jr. was more the explosive puncher between the two. And neither one really engaged. Obviously, Norman tried to push the pace, but he just didn't know how to get to Quentin, and Quentin just didn't want to fight. It looked like Quentin just wanted to survive. And sometimes when we get fights like that, they end up being like the way they were. That's one of the worst fights that I've seen. You know, and then outside of that, I've never seen a fight with Norman that I thought he looked very impressive. I've always thought like he was okay. And obviously he had the no contest in his last fight when he had the headbutt and everything. But going to the Santillon fight, Santillon is coming off of his best win against Alexis Rocha, basically destroyed him. And he's coming off a good streak of wins, you know, and I wasn't really that familiar with Santillon in that fight. Going in that fight, I kind of just was another one of those fights where I didn't have time to do much study. And, you know, I went back and looked. I remember looking at the Antonio DeMarco fight where I didn't think Santillon looked that good, and a few other fights. And I was like, all right, you know, Alexis Rocha has been tough his career. You know, I think he has a loss, but he looked tough to me, you know, and I thought that Santillon being a pressure fighter, I thought Rocha at least had the durability and toughness to deal with him and outbox him. And boy, I was wrong. And now the Brian Norman Jr. fight, and then I'm not going to lie, I was leaning towards Santillon to win simply because I just seen what he did in his last fight against a good boxer and a durable one. And I think Brian Norman just destroyed him in this fight. I mean, it was a good fight. It went, 10 rounds? I mean, it was a very, very good fight. I mean, this was a war. I mean, this might have been the best war of the entire weekend. Bloody, gruesome fight. I mean, Opetaia against Briedis II was a bloody fight. You know what I mean? Both of them injured each other, and they both had to go to the hospital again. So they gave us, moments that was similar to the first fight. Obviously, the first fight was crazier, but the second fight was pretty good too. But this fight here was a brutal, brutal fight. And Brian Norman, in this real good test here, passed. All right, with shining stars, man. He looked very, very good. Looked strong, durable, power. Santillon was coming with the pressure, but Brian Norman proved that he has the chin. All right, he took the punches, he dealt with the pressure, and he manhandled Santillon and won and stopped him in one of the craziest stoppages we've seen this year. All right, very, very good moment for Brian Norman Jr. And he went from being overlooked by many, including myself, to being the WBO interim champion. And like I said, like the welterweight, I've been saying that the welterweight division is wide open right now. You have Jerron Boots Ennis, but he could move up at any point to 154. He only has one belt. So the division is wide open right now because Terrence Crawford is fighting at 54. And Brian Norman is in position now to fight for a title very soon. All right, so which makes things interesting because I seen Brian Norman Jr. and Boots have sparred. They're very familiar with each other. So I can't wait to see what Brian can do against the very elite of the welterweight division. I can't wait. There's more fights to be made, and I can't wait to see it. Maybe it has to do with the styles. Maybe it has a lot to do with the fact that Santillon was a pressure fighter, brawler, that he just happened to be stronger than. I want to see how he looks against a good boxer. Someone that's not going to stand right in front of him, someone that's not going to be so easily hittable. We still got to see that, but he passed a big test this weekend and he performed, and it was a very good fight. A fight that I really wish I saw all the reactions the following morning. But I really wished I watched that fight live. That would have been the perfect fight to watch live, especially doing live commentary. All right. So yeah. Moving on. The main event between Denis Baranchyk, all right, and Emmanuel Navarette, and this is for the vacant WBO lightweight title. All right, these guys, Baranchyk's been around for a while. Ukrainian fighter, also part of the Ukraine Olympic team, and this was his big test here against Emmanuel Navarette, who's coming up to 135, but still the bigger guy. Still the naturally bigger guy. And it was a big test. And this is another fight that I expected a lot of upsets. I just expected Emmanuel Navarette to pull it out. I've seen Denis fight. He's a very well-schooled fighter. Moves extremely well. Has a somewhat of an awkwardness to him too, just like Navarette does. All right, but not a big puncher, but a great mover, knows when to be in and out, and controls it as well, knows how to circle his opponents. A lot of his game involves his movement, and I think part of the reason why he won this fight, it was a split decision win for Baranchyk in a very, very close fight. I personally think the fight, I scored it, I think it could have either been a draw or 113 to Baranchyk. That's the way I looked at the fight. I thought it was close, and I think it was hard to score the rounds. I think this fight here was hard because I thought, obviously, Navarette was a harder puncher. And I think even though Baranchyk was landing a little bit more and he was a busier fighter, I just think that it was hard to score because I know the judges is going to look at it as based on what they want to see. And even though I think Baranchyk did a good job, even though he got caught with some good shots, I think he did a good job by keeping the volume and the punch output high. Because if it was any lower, it would have counted against him. I think if he focused strictly off accuracy, he probably would have lost because he would have threw less punches and his punches weren't as effective as Navarette. He kept Navarette off balance throughout the fight. He was able to smother Navarette at times. And just overall, he was very physical, even though he was smaller and even though he's not a bigger puncher, he was very physical towards Navarette, and it kind of kept being at the right spots at the right time. Navarette and Navarette has always been a momentum type of fighter. Once he gets going, he's kind of hard to stop. But if you can throw off his momentum, it makes him not as effective. His rhythm was thrown off. He's always kind of start outside of the Oscar Valdez fight. He kind of starts off slow, but then when he gets going, the rhythm is going. Now he's unstoppable. But in this fight here, he just never seemed to really. He never was consistent to me. And part of the reason why I think Denny's won this fight is because he was just more consistent throughout the fight. All right. It was close. I mean, listen, if we heard another draw, I wasn't expecting another draw because they just had a draw. And I was like, man, they're probably going to just create a winner. But it was a very, very close fight. It was very close. I think also with Navarette now, as he's moving up, and he's fighting bigger guys that are used to fighting bigger punchers, Navarette's power may not be as effective up here. The competition is better at 135. Let's remove size out of the equation. The talent gap between the guys at 135 and the guys at 130 and even 126 right now, there's a huge gap to me. And plus, those guys are bigger. So even though Navarette did his thing at 126, 130, the talent gap is different. Those guys are bigger. It's not like Navarette really was unified. It's not like he became undisputed. There was a lot of fights that didn't happen at 130 and 126 that I still wanted to see. So Baranchyk winning this fight, again, it's going to be a matter of time where a fighter wasn't going to be really badly hurt by Navarette's power and was going to outbox him. And I think Barancyk's movement and his volume was throwing off Navarette's awkwardness and weird angles, and keeping Navarette off balance was a big, big deal. Pushing him off at times. Navarette just doesn't have the best balance. He never really did. But no one's ever really taken advantage of that and took a Ukrainian who was a great amateur fighter, has a lot of experience to do that. All right. So I wasn't a fan of the fight. It was just too much awkwardness on both ends. Not a lot of clean punching. It seemed like the ref seemed to be very involved too in the fight. And Jack Reese. So I really didn't enjoy the fight when I watched it this morning. But, I think the right guy won, in a close fight. And I really don't know what to expect from here because Lomachenko is not going to fight Baranchyk and Lomachenko not going to fight each other unless they have to for undisputed. I can't see them fight each other. And, Shakur has a fight coming up and Tank has a fight coming up. So I really don't know what happens next at 135. I think for now we're going to see more. I think the only unification that I expect is for Loma to fight maybe Tank or Shakur, hopefully by the end of this year. But I really don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. We just got to wait and see. I mean, all of them, I think even Lomachenko has a mandatory obligation against William Zepeda. So I really don't know if we're going to get any unifications right now. I think we're just going to get some mandatory obligations here, and we might not get a unification until next year from anyone. All right, so we'll just wait and see. All right, but that's my thoughts on that fight. Now, let's swivel back over to the Tyson Fury Alexander Usyk undercard. And I just want to run through some of the fights here. Sergey Kovalev lost a decision to Safar. And I did watch the fight. I did cover the fight live. Sergey is definitely past it. And I think it's time for him to hang it up. You know, Safar is not a guy that would have been able to compete with the Crusher back in or even close to his prime. Kovalev just doesn't have it. You know, he still knows how to control distance pretty well. He still has a very, very good jab, but the right hand wasn't really there. He's just not durable like that anymore. He almost got stopped at the end of the fight. It's just not much there, you know, and I think his time has come. At cruiserweight, the blueprint has already been made on how to beat Sergey Kovalev. You know, it's already been Ward, Alito Alvarez already shown us how to beat him. You know, so at this point, as a cruiserweight, there's no one there I really feel like he can compete with. You know, he can beat some journeymen for sure, but guys like Rahman Safar didn't really have the skills, didn't really have the technique, but he was able to pressure Kovalev and attack his body and just be more physical overall. And that is what won him the fight. I saw the Mark Chamberlain Wahab fight, and it's not really a fight. It's a first round knockout, and one of the most brutal knockouts I've seen this year so far. So if you want to check that out, Mark Chamberlain, prospect on a move up into the 135 lightweight rankings. Check out that knockout. If you didn't see it, look up Mark Chamberlain knockout of Joshua Wahab, I believe South African fighter. Just crazy knockout in the first round. And it's funny because the round was going pretty good up until Wahab got caught with a shot. Chamberlain dropped him hard, and then Wahab got back up, and Mark Chamberlain just finished him like bad. So Joe Cordina loses, all right, for the first time in his career against he loses his IBF strap at 130 to Anthony Kakachi. In a very, very good fight, man. Oh, man. You know, I swear this was the last. I'm just hyped up because it was such a good fight, all right? It went 8 rounds. This was the last video. This is the last fighter that I looked at right before I went live, because I didn't have any time to do any film study on this fight as long, you know, and all the other fights. Kakachi, I had looked into his I think his most recent fight. I think Woodstock, or it was a fighter he fought. And I looked at that fight and I said, this guy looks good. I don't know if he can beat Joe because I don't know enough about him. I don't know about his durability. You know, we know that Joe knocked out Ogawa. You know, Joe had a couple close fights recently, but they were good quality fights. So I saw Kakachi's fight and I was like, this guy looks good, but I can't call it because I don't know enough about him. And man, I mean, from the opening round, probably by the second round, Joe was having some issues. You know, and I said, you know, Joe looks relaxed. He looked like the more seasoned fighter. So I took his relaxation as, you know, he's looking for a good counter opportunity, which he was. He was definitely trying to connect with the left hook. And he was trying to catch Anthony in between the combinations on their exchanges that they had. But it seemed like almost like he was always counting on that and nothing else. And I think that's what caused them this fight. Now, Joe got hard. He got rocked hard by Anthony. And Anthony had a brilliant game plan because out of, there's a lot of ambush fighters out there. There's a lot of guys that will fight real calm and out of nowhere they'll explode on you. I think this was one of the best performances of a fighter showing that, where you just wasn't expecting it. It seemed like Joe just never can tell when this guy was just going to open up. He could never time Anthony. Anthony's timing of doing that was just epic. And sometimes the combinations will last so long that you wouldn't expect that too. You would expect him to throw 2-3 punches, but now he's throwing 7, 8, 10, 11 punches at a time. And he's connecting with most of them because Joe wasn't moving his head at all. He just was defensively. Joe defensively was probably one of the worst I've seen in recent fights that I watch. Joe's defense was not there at all. He was there to get hit throughout this entire fight. Anthony was winning round by round. Joe, after the third round, it looked like maybe the fourth and fifth rounds, he looked like he was gaining some momentum again after he recovered. But after that, it just seemed like Anthony started to take over again, and it was only a matter of time before Joe got stopped in the 8th round. Nasty stoppage. I thought the stoppage was legit. He was taking some big punches at the time, not returning fire much, and I thought the stoppage was warranted because the dude was taking too many hits. Too many hits for my liking. On to the next fight. Kabayel against Frank Sanchez. Man, this was another one that last minute, I would have never thought. I mean, this was the day of the upsets, man. Kakachi, Sanchez, Baranchyk, Norman Jr., the amount of upsets. I mean, we almost had an upset with Briedis and Opetaia, I think, But Frank Sanchez, I was on a live, and some of you will remember, Frank Sanchez was a guy that we were just talking about, man, against some of the top elite heavyweights. I thought Frank Sanchez was going to be a guy that can beat some of these guys, and pull off the upset against them. And, I was just talking about Frank Sanchez and Jared Anderson. And, I thought that fight, it always seems to keep coming up. And I really thought that Frank Sanchez, when given the opportunity, he was going to really be able to beat some of these other top heavyweights, And then Kabayel is another guy that with that Arslanbek win, I said, okay, he's another guy that we need to watch out for. But I've never been impressed with Arslanbek. He's actually my least favorite heavyweight in the world right now. So when he beat Arslanbek, I was surprised because I've seen Kabayel fight, and I've seen him fight against Eric Chisora, and I've seen him be a boxer. I didn't see him ever really being a pressure fighter. I never seen him as that. Maybe there are fights that's out there that show. I have to now go back and watching this guy because as far as pressure fighters, as a heavyweight, he's one of the best. And Frank could not deal with it. Frank started off the fight fighting off back foot, and I've seen Frank's fight on his back foot. I've seen him against F.A. Ajagba fight a boring match, but, countered and waited for the opportunities to time F.A. as he was coming in. But F.A.'s pretty much one-dimensional. Big power, big one-punch knockout power, but he only has a 1-2. There's not else much there with him. So for Frank to be able to outbox him the way he did, I said, all right, I know Frank can fight on a back foot. I've seen him do it for a few fights, and I've seen him come forward and be a little bit more aggressive, especially in his most recent fight. So I thought Frank, with whatever kind of adjustments he could make, him being more explosive, I assumed that he would edge this fight. On points. I wasn't expecting a knockout or anything. Boy, was I wrong, man. Kabayel destroyed him, walked him down with ease, never laid off. I mean, pressure. One of the best pressure fight performances for a heavyweight that I've seen recently. Usyk, obviously a pressure fighter. Joe Joyce, obviously a pressure fighter. Gerald Miller, Kanowski, there's been some pressure fighters at the heavyweight division that certain fighters they weren't able to deal with it. But Kabayel, the amount of skill and technique that he shows while letting his hands go, either on the inside, the outside, whatever way you have it, only second to Usyk up there. I think he looks more impressive than Joe Joyce. He looks more impressive than Gerald Miller did. Gerald was on the juice, so I get that. And even Adam Kanowski, when he was in his prime, he was such a fun fighter to watch. But I like Adjik. He's got the defense. I see the head control. I seen some technical things in there where he's able to handle some of these guys, and the way he just took Frank Sanchez apart, it almost looked easy. It's like kind of like, I said I don't know if it was second, third round, but I did not like Frank's body language very early in the fight. He just didn't look like he knew what to do in the ring. And I said this while watching the live. The ring, every round that passed, these two big guys, it looked like the ring was becoming smaller and smaller and smaller with each round. And once Frank wasn't mobile anymore, he couldn't move anymore, it was very easy for Kabayel to just destroy him. Stopped him in the 7th round, dropped him twice. Very, very good performance. All right. And my last fight for the day, Jai Opetaia against Marius Briedis. This fight was a very good fight. It went very similar to the first fight. Not as much action. I think Jai Opetaia started a lot faster in the first fight, and picked up a lot of those earlier rounds. Did bloody and break Marius Briedis' nose midway through the fight, but it seemed like he started to slow down again with that pendulum step bouncing that he does throughout the fight. It seems like Jai slows down, gasses out a little bit. Briedis seemed to hurt him. I think he also broke his nose as well. I couldn't tell if his jaw was broken or not, but it seemed like Briedis rallied, like, at least for the last 4 rounds. I think Jai did enough to edge it, but I also think that the scorecards were a lot closer. Like, I'm thinking like 115, 113 for Jai. I don't think it was clear. I think Marius Briedis picked up a lot of rounds in the second half of that fight. And I think Jai came, he was hurt. He was getting walked down. Briedis was landing at will. And it was a good fight. Listen, it was very similar to the first. I just have a lot of questions now. And this is what I said on the live. Briedis, to me, shouldn't retire. I was just talking about Lomachenko and not Lomachenko, Usyk. And Briedis has been the best cruiserweight since Usyk. And Jai, a performance against Briedis kind of is made me feel like he was the top guy at the division. And he is still the top guy at the division, but I still need to see more, only because the one thing that I will take away, the one weakness that I see in Jai, is that he gasses. He gasses. He does. And we haven't seen that in his most recent fight, because against Zorro, against Thompson, he destroyed him so quickly that it didn't need to go late. But in this fight here, he clearly gassed. He gassed in the first fight, and Briedis began to take over. And Briedis, got to give him a lot of credit. His will to win is insane. I still have to... You have to wonder, does Jai and Briedis beat everybody else at cruiserweight? This is what I said on the live. I don't know how these two look against everybody else, because no one has really proven himself yet. And you also got, like, Lawrence Okolie lost to Dylan Smith, obviously, right? But Lawrence Okolie's not going to be fighting at heavyweight. I mean, cruiserweight anymore. But this Ramirez just got there. Bill Smith just became champ. Reactpour is fighting Bill Smith, and I still don't think there's much there yet to prove where he's at, even if he is to beat Bill Smith in the rematch. And then when you go on a list, you go all the way down. Some of these guys been there for some time. Master Nick, you know, who else has been here? Master Nick, you got Perez, you got McKellian. You got a lot of these guys that's been around for a minute. That was there during Briedis' run, Usyk's run. Marcus Brown is up there now. All right, so you got a lot of these guys. Joe Smith is up there. So you got a lot of these guys. You can make a strong argument, and I will say this. This is my opinion alone. I believe that Jai Opetaia and Mary's Briedis right now are still the best two cruiserweights. Until someone beats them, I think those two are the top two guys right now. Until someone beats them. I have to see it for me to believe it. You know, that's just the way I'm gonna leave it at that for now. There's a lot of talent there, but I want to see the fights. So for now, even though Jai to me has shown somewhat that he is a little bit, he could be a bit vulnerable, it's against Mary's Briedis. Briedis needs to get back in the ring immediately. Some people were saying they want to see a third fight. I don't mind seeing a third fight. Because both of the first two fights, this one was a little slower because it looked like Briedis was rusty. Briedis being at 39, he needs to get back in there ASAP. All right, because he can't let the age get in the way here, because I actually think he's better than all of these guys that's on the come up. All right, but he needs to get back in there because he did look rusty the first couple rounds. All right, so anyway, he is now IBF champ. And I'm talking about Jai Opetaia, went to decision, and I'm just waiting for some kind of unification next. Hopefully we get that soon. All right, so yeah, that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up, share the video, and I'll see you guys on the next one. We got fights to break down. We got Josh Taylor fighting. He's fighting. His name is, I can't think of his name right now. Jack Catterall. Jack Catterall 2 is this weekend. I should be covering the fight, but I'll let you guys know. But I will do a breakdown as soon as I get some film study. I do just want to rewatch the first fight and do a little bit of film study between the two and see where these guys can do better in a rematch. So I will give you a breakdown some point this week. And yeah, so be on the lookout for that. And then I got to do a breakdown, a lot of breakdowns for next week's super card. All right. So anyway, I'll see you guys on the next one. I'm out. Y'all have a good day. The weather is beautiful here in New York, so I'm going to go enjoy it. Peace.